When strength is your last remaining choice, you never realize how strong you really are. We can stay with the people we love, even if we are so little that we are unaware of what we are going through, when the only thing left to do is to endure and not give up. However, we also experience the love and the loss. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. This is the tale of a little child who faced several challenges from the moment of his birth. A couple appeared at the police station one morning after a heated quarrel, which was unusual for that location and time of day. The reason for it was also somewhat unexpected because it included a newborn who was just 2 months old and had no idea what was going on in her environment. Since the infant had not been registered in the civil registration at the time of her birth, no one wanted to care for her, and the discussion began. Despite this, the child did not even have a name. Since she was a juvenile, the police had limited authority in this case, so they contacted a prosecutor to handle it instead. The first thing in the morning that arrived was the prosecutor. One of the cops was taking care of the infant while the parents were present. Thus, the proper inquiry into the baby's destiny was initiated. The parents gave evidence that nobody was capable of caring for her. They both said that having her was a huge mistake and that they already had other lives. Furthermore, the girl had special needs from birth, so they were unable to provide her with the care and medications she needed. Because no one wanted to care for her because of her condition, the entire situation was viewed as an apparent abandonment by her birth parents. The 40-year-old father already had a family of his own, but the 38-year-old mother claimed to be 38 years old and to have 5 more children. Officer Ramirez, the lone female member of the team, took control of the infant's care during this entire ordeal and grew attached to the young child. Officer Ramirez was perplexed as to why her parents desired to get rid of her, despite the fact that her diagnosis, a cleft lip, was obvious at birth. She was a very sensitive youngster, and despite the fact that it was impossible, her stare gave the impression that she understood everything going on in her environment. The state could not fully assume custody of the child since the investigation would take time. She would also require far more care than an orphanage could offer because of her condition. Officer Ramirez offered to look after the infant, as they had already formed a tenuous relationship. Alongside no other option, she brought the baby home and cared for her alongside her mother, who was an experienced nurse. After the officer brought the young girl home, Officer Ramirez's mother, who cherished infants and was especially touched by this one, welcomed her with open arms. They both considered names for the girl because she didn't have one. They called her Tobias from that point on, since they thought Tobias was a good name. The officer lived in an extremely modest house, quite the reverse. Her pay as a police officer was quite low, and so was her tiny family. Tobias slept in an improvised bed that night. She spent the entire night at ease and composed, despite its imperfections. But when she was lying down, her condition made breathing difficult for her. Officer Ramirez kept a close eye on her throughout the night, fearing for her safety because kids with this illness were more prone to infections or respiratory problems. Luckily, Tobias made it through the night. Officer Ramirez left Tobias in her mother's care and went back to the police station, filled with trust. As the inquiry went on, it became clearer that the mother lacked the mental and financial capacity to raise the kid. However, it remained unclear how the father would figure into the child's destiny. It would have been great for the father to care for the child, given her condition. The prosecutor has not, however, reached a conclusion yet. The girl needed a genuine family, which is why Officer Ramirez was very watchful. A few hours later, the father was absolved of all liability, possibly in exchange for a payment. The officer was shocked to learn that the infant had been turned over to social services. She disagreed with the prosecutor's choice, claiming that the kid required urgent medical attention and surgery in order to have a normal life. However, nobody gave her any attention. Except for Officer Ramirez, everyone was glad to see the case through to completion. She objected, but the child was given to her. Ramirez and her mother made the decision to try all in their power to save the young angel when they witnessed her being carried into the clutches of hell. As a police officer, Ramirez managed to get a court order enabling her and her mother to check on the child's health as frequently as they pleased at the shelter. Although this was the case, their ultimate goal was to spend as much time as possible with Tobias, who they both cherished. Her mother and daughter would frequently visit her. She would greet them with toothless smiles and joyful yells, even though Tobias was very tiny and didn't comprehend anything at all. She lived to be 8 months old, but her mother and daughter wanted to give her every opportunity. As they saw the child's health deteriorate daily in the shelter from inadequate treatment, they launched a fundraising campaign for the procedure she desperately required. Everything about the event proceeded smoothly. Activities and contributions brought in support one by one. Nevertheless, rather than standing with Officer Ramirez, her allies teased her. Why she would devote so much of her time to a child who wasn't even her own was beyond their comprehension. However, they were unaware that being bloodless did not compel apathy. On the contrary, Officer Ramirez's heart had been won over by this youngster. Mother and daughter worked tirelessly for 3 months to accumulate enough money for the procedure. When a call came in, they both hurried to the shelter, even though they were almost there. Given Officer Ramirez's commitment, the caretakers phoned her as soon as Tobias had a high temperature. Fearing the worst for the infant, Ramirez and her mother came in a state of panic. They immediately took her to the hospital as they arrived. In the hopes that the physicians could assist her, they caressed her small face and prayed for her well-being. They took her to the best hospital they could afford, using the money they had saved for her surgery. Tobias was brought into the emergency department, and they removed him in order to stabilize him. For him, those were really important hours since he was a young child in need of constant attention. After waiting outside for hours on end for some word, the doctors eventually told the two ladies that the child was stable, but that they needed to exercise extreme caution in the coming hours. The following several hours were critical as his body would respond to the toughest treatments as his little body battled an infection. Although they were glad that the child was okay for the time being, they were extremely concerned. They observed him via a glass wall, as they were unable to enter to see him. He appeared to be sleeping soundly, despite the fact that his little body was attached to several pieces of equipment. They hoped that he would be able to escape, but occasionally, no matter how much we ask, certain things are just not meant to be. That night, little Tobias, who was only a few months old, went gone. His little frame was unable to fend off the virus. They were at a loss for what to do because of his extreme weakness. The two women who had been observing the kid for hours were heartbroken when he finally breathed his last. It was a devastating shock, particularly for Ramirez, who had hoped to adopt the child following his surgery, but that was now out of the question. She accused herself, the prosecutor, and his parents of failing to do more to save the helpless infant. Now, while they both possessed large sums of money that weren't theirs, Tobias, they didn't feel good spending money. Therefore, they didn't want to. They thus gave all they owned to a charity that helped kids just like him in his honor. I hope the money finds its way to some youngster who could use it to save his life. When the mothers in ancient days were grieving the death of the child, it was the only thing that gave them consolation. However, Officer Ramirez made friends with the organization's director, and gradually she developed an interest in the way it operated and how it assisted so many kids. She offered her assistance. She desired to assist. She adored it for that reason. That's the reason she went into law enforcement. Serving others was her calling. And as she observed all those destitute kids, she couldn't help but think of her dear Tobias. She found great comfort in assisting, believing that by doing so, she was also benefiting Tobias, who was already one more angel in paradise. She gave her badge to Ramirez shortly after, at which point she committed herself entirely to social help. She was so at ease because she had rediscovered her love and her passion for helping people, especially children. She spent a significant portion of her life with her mother's unwavering support, who served as both her greatest inspiration and her source of strength, enabling her to battle day by day. It's okay to grieve the loss of a loved one, and the fact that you were able to do so much in their memory demonstrates how much love they were. Officer Ramirez was inspired and driven by her love for him to pursue her real career after meeting the small kid who fundamentally altered her life. Not everyone is fortunate enough to uncover that driving force, but you must have courage to confront your anxieties in order to ultimately realize why life is worthwhile. We appreciate you viewing this video. It is our sincere wish that you find this article entertaining. If so, please leave us a kind like. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.